The last time Victoria Ann had cried was the night her mother died. But now, standing in the dusty main street of Panamint, California, with a worn leather pouch clutched in her trembling hands, she felt the hot sting of tears threatening to return. It was late September in 1878, and the desert air carried the scent of sage and desperation as she made her way toward the general store, each step feeling heavier than the last because what she carried was all that remained of the woman who had raised her with nothing but love and determination. Her mother had been dead 3 months now, gone from the fever that swept through their small ranch outside of town, taking her father just 2 weeks before. Victoria was 22 years old and utterly alone, with debts mounting faster than she could count, and the bank threatening to take the ranch that had been in her father's family since they had settled in the Panamint Valley back in the gold rush days. The jewelry in the pouch had been her mother's most treasured possessions, passed down from Victoria's grandmother, who had traveled west in a covered wagon, surviving hardships Victoria could only imagine. Each piece carried a story, a memory, a fragment of the past that Victoria had grown up hearing about on quiet evenings by the fireplace. The turquoise pendant her grandmother had traded for with a Paiute woman who had shown her family where to find water during a desperate crossing. The silver hairpin her mother had worn on her wedding day, engraved with delicate roses that caught the light. The gold locket containing a tiny portrait of Victoria as a baby, so small she could barely make out her own features. The pearl earrings that had come all the way from Boston, carried across a continent in a wooden box lined with velvet. Each piece was precious, irreplaceable, and Victoria was about to sell them all to strangers. She paused outside the general store, watching through the dusty window as Mrs. Henderson helped a customer select fabric from the bolts stacked against the wall. The store did some trading, Victoria knew, and Mrs. Henderson had agreed to display the jewelry with a price tag, taking a small commission if anyone bought them. It was not the best arrangement, but Victoria had few options. The larger towns like Independence had proper jewelers, but she had no money for the journey and no time to spare. The bank had given her until the end of October to settle the debt, and that deadline loomed like a thundercloud on the horizon. Taking a deep breath, Victoria pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming softly. Mrs. Henderson looked up and smiled, though Victoria could see the pity in the older woman's eyes. Everyone in Panamint knew about her situation. In a town of barely 300 souls, there were no secrets. "Victoria, dear," Mrs. Henderson said warmly, wiping her hands on her apron. "You have them with you." Victoria nodded, unable to trust her voice just yet. She set the pouch on the counter and carefully began removing each piece, laying them out on a square of clean cloth Mrs. Henderson provided. In the afternoon light streaming through the window, the jewelry seemed to glow with an inner fire, each piece more beautiful than Victoria remembered. Her hands shook slightly as she positioned the turquoise pendant just so, the silver hairpin beside it. "They are lovely, Mrs. Henderson said softly, her weathered fingers hovering over the gold locket but not quite touching it, as if she understood how much this cost Victoria. "Your mother wore this locket every Sunday to church. I always admired it. She wanted me to have something to remember her by," Victoria whispered, her throat tight. "But I cannot keep them and lose the ranch too. The land is what they worked for all those years. I cannot let it go to the bank without a fight." Mrs. Henderson nodded, her expression understanding. "You are a brave girl, Victoria. Your parents would be proud of the woman you have become. We will find buyers for these, I promise you. There are miners with money coming through town, and plenty of men looking for gifts for their sweethearts." The irony was not lost on Victoria. Her mother's tokens of love, bought and given with joy, would now be sold to fund someone else's courtship, while Victoria faced a future that looked increasingly lonely and uncertain. But she forced a smile and thanked Mrs. Henderson before stepping back out into the bright sunlight, feeling lighter without the weight of the jewelry, but somehow heavier in her heart. She was walking back toward where she had tied her horse when she heard the sound of hoofbeats and turned to see a stranger riding into town. He sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the desert sky, and even from a distance, Victoria could tell he was a cowboy through and through. His hat was dusty from the trail, his clothes worn but well-maintained, and the horse beneath him was a magnificent chestnut mare that moved with the easy grace of an animal well cared for and well loved. Something about him caught her attention, though she could not have said what. Perhaps it was the way he rode, with a quiet confidence that suggested he was comfortable in his own skin and had nothing to prove to anyone. Or perhaps it was simply that he was new, a fresh face in a town where Victoria had known everyone since childhood. Whatever the reason, she found herself watching as he dismounted in front of the saloon, tied his horse to the rail, and then seemed to change his mind, looking around the street as if getting his bearings. His gaze swept past the saloon, past the livery stable and the hotel, and landed on the general store. Then, perhaps sensing her stare, his eyes found Victoria standing in the street. Even across the distance, she felt the impact of that look, a sudden connection she could not explain and did not entirely trust. He touched the brim of his hat in a polite gesture, and Victoria, flustered for reasons she did not understand, quickly turned away and hurried to her horse. She did not see him again until 3 days later when she returned to town to check on the jewelry. She had spent those days working herself to exhaustion on the ranch, trying to keep up with the tasks that had once been divided among 3 people. The chickens needed feeding, the garden needed watering, the fences needed mending, and the mare her father had been training needed exercising. It was back-breaking work made harder by her grief and worry, but Victoria refused to give up. She fell into bed each night too tired to dream and woke each morning with the sun, determined to prove she could make it alone. But when she walked into the general store that afternoon, Mrs. Henderson's face told her everything before the older woman spoke a word. "I sold them all, Victoria," Mrs. Henderson said, and there was something odd in her voice, a note Victoria could not quite identify. Every piece, all to the same buyer. Victoria's heart lurched. Relief that she would have the money, grief that the jewelry was truly gone, all mixed together until she was not sure what she felt. All of them. To one person. "A cowboy came in yesterday afternoon," Mrs. Henderson said, reaching under the counter to pull out an envelope. Paid in cash, did not even try to bargain down the prices. He looked at each piece real careful-like, and then he bought them all. Victoria took the envelope with trembling fingers and looked inside. The amount was exactly what she had hoped for, enough to pay off the immediate debt to the bank with a little left over for supplies. It was a miracle, truly, but she felt hollow inside. Did he say what he wanted with them? Was it for a wife or a sweetheart? "That is the strange thing, Mrs. Henderson said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "He did not say much at all, just asked if these belonged to someone local, and I said yes to you. He got real quiet then, looked at them again, and counted out the money. But Victoria, before he left, he asked where you lived." A chill ran down Victoria's spine despite the warmth of the store. "He asked about me. Did you tell him?" "I gave him general directions to your ranch," Mrs. Henderson admitted, looking worried now. "I hope that was all right. He seemed like a decent sort, very polite and well-spoken." Said his name was Lucas Calloway, that he was passing through working cattle drives and doing ranch work where he could find it. But if I should not have said anything— No, it is fine, Victoria interrupted, though her mind was racing. Why would a stranger buy all her mother's jewelry and then ask about her? It made no sense, unless he was planning to rob her, thinking she now had cash money at the ranch. But that seemed far-fetched. A thief would not announce himself by buying jewelry in broad daylight and asking for directions. Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. This money will save the ranch, at least for now. She left the store in a daze, tucking the envelope safely into her bag. The October sun was warm on her face as she rode home, but she found herself looking over her shoulder more than once, half expecting to see the stranger following her. The trail wound through the valley, past Joshua trees and scrub brush, the mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. It was beautiful country, harsh but honest, and Victoria loved it with a fierceness that surprised even her. The ranch came into view as she crested a small rise. The house her father had built with his own hands, the barn where her mother had taught her to milk cows and gather eggs. It was modest but sturdy, designed to withstand the desert winds and the occasional flash flood that roared through the valley. Victoria had been born in that house, had taken her first steps on that porch, had said goodbye to both her parents in the bedroom upstairs. She would fight with everything she had to keep it. She was unsaddling her horse when she heard hoofbeats and turned to see a rider approaching. Her breath caught as she recognized the chestnut mare and the tall figure in the saddle. Lucas Calloway was coming up the path to her ranch, and in the clear afternoon light she could see him properly for the first time. He was younger than she had initially thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath his hat and eyes the color of cedar bark. His face was tanned from days in the sun, and he had the lean, muscular build of a man who made his living with his body rather than his mind. But it was his expression that caught Victoria's attention, open and earnest and perhaps a little nervous, as if he were unsure of his welcome. He dismounted before he reached the porch, leading his horse the last few yards on foot in a gesture Victoria recognized as respectful. You did not ride right up to someone's house unless invited, her father had taught her. It was an old courtesy, one many men ignored these days, but this stranger observed it. "Miss Anne," he said, his voice deep and smooth with a hint of a drawl that suggested he had come from further south. "My name is Lucas Calloway. Mrs. Henderson at the general store said I might find you here. I hope I am not intruding." Victoria straightened, her hand instinctively moving to the rifle she kept by the barn door, not raising it, just touching it, making sure he saw it. "Mr. Calloway, Mrs. Henderson told me you bought my mother's jewelry, all of it." "Yes, madam, I did." He reached into his saddlebag slowly, making sure she could see every movement, and pulled out a cloth bundle. Victoria's heart stuttered as she recognized the fabric, the same one Mrs. Henderson had used to display the jewelry. "I bought it because I wanted to bring it back to you." The words did not make sense. Victoria stared at him, then at the bundle, then back at his face, searching for signs of mockery or deceit. "I do not understand. Why would you buy it only to return it?" Lucas took a few steps closer, stopping when he saw her tense. He laid the bundle on the porch railing, then stepped back with his hands visible and empty. "I heard Mrs. Henderson talking to another customer about your situation, about how you lost your parents and were selling your mother's things to save your ranch. It did not seem right that you should lose both your family and your memories of them, so I bought the jewelry and now I am giving it back to you." Victoria felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. "But the money, I need that money to pay the bank." "The money is yours." "I am not asking for it back." Lucas met her eyes steadily. Consider it a gift or a loan if that sits better with you, but those pieces mean something to you and they should stay in your family where they belong." "I cannot accept this," Victoria said, though her hands itched to reach for the bundle to hold her mother's locket once more. "I do not even know you. Why would you do this for a stranger?" Lucas was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the mountains in the distance. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "I lost my own mother when I was 15, cholera on the trail driving cattle up from Texas. We buried her in Kansas, in ground she had never seen before, so far from home. All I have of her is a handkerchief she embroidered with my initials. I keep it in my pocket always, even though it is worn thin now and the thread is fading. I know what it means to hold onto pieces of the people we have loved and lost. I could not stand by and watch you lose yours too, not if I could prevent it." The simple honesty in his words cracked something open inside Victoria. The tears she had been holding back for days spilled over, running hot down her cheeks. She covered her face with her hands, embarrassed to be crying in front of this stranger, but unable to stop. She heard him move, thought perhaps he was leaving, but then felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I did not mean to make you cry, I just wanted to help." "No one has helped me," Victoria choked out between sobs. "Not since they died. Everyone in town feels sorry for me, but no one has actually done anything. They watch and they whisper and they wait to see if I will fail. But you, a stranger who owes me nothing, you give me back the only things I have left of my mother. How am I supposed to understand that?" "You do not have to understand it," Lucas said. "You just have to accept it. Please, let me do this one good thing." Victoria lowered her hands and looked at him through her tears. His face was close to hers now, and she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the small scar on his chin, the genuine concern in his expression. He smelled of leather and horse and the open trail, and there was something solid and dependable about his presence that made her want to trust him even though every rational part of her brain warned against it. "Why are you really doing this?" she whispered. "There must be something you want in return." "There is not," Lucas said, but then he paused and corrected himself. "That is not entirely true. I would like to help you with your ranch if you would let me. I heard you are trying to run it alone, and that is too much for one person. I am good with horses, decent with cattle, and I can fix just about anything that breaks. I would work for room and board, nothing more, at least until you get back on your feet." Victoria stepped back, swiping at her tears with the back of her hand. "You want to work here? For me? If you will have me. I understand if you say no. A woman alone cannot be too careful and you have no reason to trust me, but I give you my word I would work hard and cause you no trouble, and if at any time you wanted me to leave, I would go, no questions asked." It was insane. He was a complete stranger who had ridden into town less than a week ago. She knew nothing about him except that he had done one extraordinarily kind thing and claimed to want nothing in return. Every sensible bone in her body screamed that this was a bad idea, that she should thank him for the jewelry and send him on his way. But Victoria was tired, so tired she felt like she might collapse right there in the yard. Tired of working from dawn to dusk and falling further behind. Tired of lying awake at night wondering how she would manage the next day. Tired of being alone with her grief and her fears. And here was someone offering help with no strings attached, someone who had already proven he was capable of extraordinary kindness. 1 month, she heard herself say. "You can stay for 1 month, and we will see how it goes. There is a small room off the barn where the ranch hands used to sleep when my father could afford to hire them. It is not much, but it has a bed and a stove. I can provide 3 meals a day, and if you do good work, I will pay you a small wage if I can spare it. The smile that broke across Lucas's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. "Thank you, Miss Anne. You will not regret this, I promise you." "Victoria," she said, surprising herself again. "If you are going to be working here, you should call me Victoria." "Victoria," he repeated, and the way he said her name, soft and careful as if it were something precious, sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "I am Lucas, then. No need for formalities between us." She showed him to the room, which was indeed small but clean enough after she swept out the dust and cobwebs. Lucas seemed genuinely pleased with it, setting his few belongings on the narrow bed with the care of someone who had lived out of a bedroll more often than not. Victoria found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking, trying to understand this man who had dropped into her life like a miracle she had not dared pray for. That night, she sat at her mother's kitchen table with the jewelry spread out before her, touching each piece with gentle fingers. The turquoise pendant still held warmth from the day's sun. The silver hairpin caught the lamplight and threw tiny stars across the wall. The gold locket opened at her touch, revealing the tiny portrait inside, and Victoria held it to her heart and let herself cry again. But this time the tears felt different. Not quite happy, but not drowning in despair either. Something closer to hope. The next morning, Victoria woke to the sound of hammering and went outside to find Lucas already hard at work repairing the section of fence she had been meaning to fix for weeks. He had his shirt sleeves rolled up, and she could see the play of muscles in his forearms as he drove nails into the weathered wood. He looked up when he heard her approach and smiled in greeting. "Good morning. I hope I did not wake you. I wanted to get an early start." "I am usually up before dawn anyway," Victoria said, feeling oddly self-conscious in her work dress with her hair hastily pinned up. "You did not have to start so soon. I have not even made breakfast yet. I am used to early mornings. Spent the last few years working cattle drives, and those start before the sun is even thinking about rising." He set down his hammer and wiped his brow. "But I would not say no to breakfast when you have time to make it." They fell into an easy routine over the following days. Victoria handled the cooking and the garden and the chickens, while Lucas took on the heavier work of repairs and maintenance. He fixed the barn door that had been hanging crooked for months, reinforced the chicken coop against coyotes, and spent hours working with the mare her father had been training, gentle and patient until the skittish animal began to trust him. In the evenings, they ate dinner together at the kitchen table, and Victoria found herself looking forward to this time more than she cared to admit. Lucas was easy to talk to, with stories from his years on the trail that made her laugh and a thoughtful way of listening that made her feel heard. He asked about her parents, and she found herself sharing memories she had kept locked away since their deaths, stories of her childhood and the love that had filled this house. "Your father sounds like he was a good man," Lucas said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "Building this place from nothing, raising a daughter who is strong enough to fight for it. That is a legacy to be proud of." "He would have liked you," Victoria said, and realized it was true. Her father had valued hard work and honesty above all else, and Lucas embodied both qualities. "He always said you could judge a man by how he treated animals and women. You are kind to both." Lucas ducked his head, looking pleased but embarrassed. "I try to be decent. My mother raised me to respect others, and I do my best to honor her memory in how I live." "Do you have other family?" Victoria asked. "Brothers or sisters?" "A younger brother. Last I heard he was working as a deputy in Tucson. We write when we can, but it has been a while since I have seen him. Our father died when I was 12, and after our mother passed, we both just started drifting, looking for places to belong." Lucas glanced at her with something soft in his eyes. This is the first place that has felt like it might be home in a very long time. The words hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning Victoria was not quite ready to examine. Instead, she changed the subject to the work that needed doing the next day. And if Lucas was disappointed, he hid it well. 2 weeks into October, Victoria rode into Panamint to make her payment to the bank. She wore her mother's turquoise pendant under her dress, the stone cool against her skin, a talisman of courage. The bank manager, a stern man named Mr. Whitmore, looked surprised when she handed over the money, as if he had already written off her ranch as his. "This covers the immediate debt," Mr. Whitmore said, counting the bills with practiced efficiency. "But you understand there is still the original loan to pay down, Miss Anne. I cannot extend any more delays." "I understand," Victoria said, keeping her voice steady though her stomach churned. "I will make the monthly payments as agreed. The ranch is starting to turn around." This was not entirely true. The ranch was not losing ground as rapidly as before, thanks to Lucas's help, but it was far from profitable. Still, Victoria refused to show weakness in front of Mr. Whitmore, who she suspected would enjoy seeing her fail. When she emerged from the bank, she nearly collided with a woman she recognized from church. Sarah Mitchell was a few years older than Victoria, married to one of the miners who worked the silver claims in the hills above town. She was also one of the worst gossips in Panamint, her eyes always hungry for scandal. "Victoria Ann, is it true you have a man living at your ranch?" Sarah asked without preamble, her voice pitched loud enough that several passers-by turned to look. Victoria felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her chin high. "I have hired a ranch hand, yes, Lucas Calloway. He is helping with repairs and maintenance." "A ranch hand who sleeps there overnight, I hear," Sarah said with a knowing smile that made Victoria want to slap her. "People are talking, you know. A young woman alone with a strange man, it is not proper." "Lucas sleeps in the ranch hand quarters off the barn, and my reputation is my own concern," Victoria said coldly. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have supplies to purchase." She pushed past Sarah, her hands shaking with anger and something that might have been shame. She knew how it looked, of course she did. But what choice did she have? She could not run the ranch alone, and she could not afford to hire someone from town who would demand real wages. Lucas was a godsend, and she refused to send him away just because narrow-minded people could not understand a relationship built on mutual respect rather than romance. Except, whispered a small voice in the back of her mind, was that entirely true? Could she honestly say there was nothing more than respect between them? The way her heart lifted when she heard his voice in the morning, the way she found herself watching him work and admiring the strength in his hands, the way she felt safe for the first time since her parents died whenever he was near. These were not the feelings of an employer for her hired hand. She was so lost in thought that she did not see the man until she walked straight into him. Strong hands caught her arms, steadying her, and she looked up into Lucas's concerned face. "Victoria, are you all right? You look upset." "I am fine," she said automatically, then sagged against him, not caring who saw. "No, I am not fine. Sarah Mitchell was saying things about you and me, about how it is not proper for you to be living at the ranch." Lucas's jaw tightened, but his voice was gentle when he spoke. "Do you want me to leave? I told you I would go if you asked, and I meant it. I do not want to damage your reputation." "No." The word came out more forcefully than Victoria intended, and she saw surprise flicker across his face. "No, I do not want you to leave. I just wish people would mind their own business." "People are going to talk no matter what we do," Lucas said quietly. The question is whether you care enough about their opinions to let it change how you live your life." Victoria looked up at him, at the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time, and made a decision. "I do not care. Let them talk. You have done nothing but help me, and I will not throw that away because some people have small minds and smaller hearts." The smile he gave her was brilliant, and without thinking, Victoria reached up and squeezed his hand. The contact sent a spark through her, electric and warm, and from the way Lucas's eyes widened, she knew he felt it too. They stood there in the middle of the street, hands clasped, until someone cleared their throat pointedly and they broke apart, both flushing. "I should get those supplies," Victoria said, her voice coming out breathier than normal. "I will help you," Lucas offered, and they walked to the general store side by side, not quite touching but close enough that Victoria could feel the heat radiating from his body. Mrs. Henderson greeted them warmly and did not comment on them being together, for which Victoria was grateful. They gathered flour and sugar, coffee and salt, the basic necessities Victoria could afford. Lucas added a few items to the pile when he thought she was not looking, a luxury like real chocolate and a bottle of vanilla extract, paying for them separately so Victoria could not protest. On the ride back to the ranch, loaded down with supplies, Lucas told her about a job he had heard about in town. A local rancher named Mr. Patterson was looking for experienced cowboys to help with a cattle drive to independence, good pay for 2 weeks of work. "You should take it," Victoria said, trying to ignore the way her stomach sank at the thought of him being gone for 2 weeks. "The money would be useful." "I do not want to leave you alone again," Lucas said. "You just got help. I do not feel right abandoning you so soon." "It is not abandonment if I am telling you to go. Besides, 2 weeks is not so long, and you said yourself the ranch is in much better shape than when you arrived. I can manage for a little while." Victoria forced a smile. "And the money you earn could help both of us." "You have been working for nothing but room and board. You deserve actual wages." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, his eyes on the trail ahead. "What if I do not want wages? What if I am content right where I am?" The words seemed to carry a deeper meaning, and Victoria's heart began to pound. "Lucas, I know it has only been a few weeks," he interrupted, his voice rough. "I know this is probably too soon and I should keep my mouth shut. But Victoria, I have to tell you, I did not just come back to return your jewelry. I mean, I did, that was the whole reason. But after I met you, after I saw how brave and strong you were, trying to hold onto your home all alone, I could not bring myself to leave. I have been drifting for years, never staying anywhere for long, never letting myself get attached. But you, this place, it feels like what I have been searching for." Victoria's hands tightened on the reins, her horse sensing her tension and dancing sideways. She brought the mare under control with practiced ease, using the moment to gather her scattered thoughts. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I have feelings for you," Lucas said, and now he turned to look at her directly, his eyes intense and honest. "I am saying that if you feel even a fraction of what I feel, I would like the chance to court you properly. And if you do not, I will respect that and we will never speak of it again, but I had to tell you the truth. I am falling in love with you, Victoria Ann." The world seemed to slow down, the desert around them going quiet and still. Victoria could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could feel every breath she took as if it were her first. She thought about the past few weeks, the way Lucas had slipped into her life and made himself essential. The way he made her laugh when she thought she had forgotten how. The way he listened when she talked about her parents, really listened, as if her words mattered. The way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention, like she was something precious and rare. "I feel it too," she whispered, and watched joy transform his face. I tried not to because it seemed crazy to fall for someone so quickly. But Lucas, when I think about you leaving, even for 2 weeks, it feels like losing something vital. You have become, I do not even know how to explain it, important, essential, like you were always meant to be here. Lucas let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, relief and happiness mixing together. I will not take the job with Patterson. I will stay here with you. No, Victoria said firmly. You will take the job, earn the money, and come back. We have time. We do not have to rush anything. And Lucas, if we are going to do this, if we are truly going to court, I need you to understand what you are getting into. This ranch is barely surviving. I have debts that will take years to pay off. I am not some easy catch. I come with more problems than solutions. I do not want easy, Lucas said. I want real. I want you, problems and all. They rode the rest of the way home in charged silence, the air between them crackling with new awareness. When they reached the ranch, Lucas helped her unload the supplies, and their hands brushed more than was strictly necessary. Victoria found herself hyper-aware of his presence, the way he moved, the sound of his breathing, the warmth of his body when he stood close. That evening after dinner, Lucas asked if he could sit with her on the porch for a while. They settled onto the old wooden bench her father had built, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The desert night was cool and clear, the air smelling of sage and dust. "Tell me about your dreams," Lucas said softly. "What do you want for this place, if you could have anything?" Victoria leaned back, letting herself imagine a future that felt possible now in a way it had not before. "I want to build the herd back up, maybe get some good breeding stock. My father always talked about raising quarter horses, the kind that are smart and fast and can work cattle. I want to fix up the house, repair the roof and maybe add a room or two. I want to make this ranch profitable, not just surviving but truly thriving. And I want it to be full of life again, of people and laughter and hope." "That sounds like a fine dream," Lucas said, "the kind of dream worth working for." "What about you?" Victoria asked. "What do you dream about?" Lucas was quiet for so long she thought perhaps he would not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and earnest. "I dream about belonging somewhere, about putting down roots and building something that lasts. I dream about having a family, not just blood relations but people who choose to be together, who work side by side and take care of each other. I dream about waking up in the same bed for years and years, knowing exactly where I am and who I am and being content with both. I dream about love, the kind that is steady and real and does not run out when things get hard." Victoria reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. They were rough and calloused from work, but they held hers with such gentle strength that she felt safe and cherished. "Those are good dreams." "They are dreams I could build here," Lucas said, squeezing her hand. "With you, if you will let me." She turned to look at him, this man who had appeared in her life like an answer to prayers she had been too proud to speak. In the starlight, his face was shadowed, but she could see his eyes, warm and honest and full of hope. "I am afraid," she admitted. "I have lost everyone I have ever loved. I do not know if I can bear to lose someone else." "You will not lose me," Lucas promised. "Not if I have any say in it. I am not going anywhere, Victoria. You are stuck with me now." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this happiness was real and lasting. But the fear was there, a shadow she could not quite shake. Still, she made herself nod, made herself smile. "All right then. Stay, build dreams with me. We will see where this goes." Lucas lifted their joined hands and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles, the gesture so sweet and old-fashioned that Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "I will make you glad you took a chance on me. I swear it." The next morning, Lucas left for the cattle drive with Mr. Patterson. Victoria watched him ride away, her heart in her throat, and had to resist the urge to call him back. He turned in his saddle once, waving, and she waved back until he disappeared over the rise. The following 2 weeks were the longest of Victoria's life. She threw herself into work, determined to prove she could manage alone, but the ranch felt empty without Lucas's presence. She found herself listening for his voice, turning to share a thought before remembering he was not there. The chickens seemed quieter, the mare more skittish, or perhaps that was just Victoria projecting her own unsettled feelings onto the animals. She went to church on Sunday, enduring the whispers and speculative looks with her head held high. Sarah Mitchell tried to corner her after the service, but Victoria pleaded chores and escaped before the woman could start interrogating her about Lucas. She knew the whole town was probably gossiping about them, and she found she truly did not care. Let them talk. She and Lucas were doing nothing wrong, and their courtship, if that was what this was nobody's business but their own. On the 13th day of Lucas's absence, Victoria was in the barn when she heard riders approaching. Her first thought was that Lucas had returned early, and joy surged through her. But when she emerged into the sunlight, she saw not Lucas but 3 rough-looking men on horses, and her blood ran cold. The one in front was big and bearded, with mean eyes and a smile that made Victoria's skin crawl. "Afternoon, miss. This the Ann Ranch, it is," Victoria said, keeping her voice steady. She was acutely aware of the rifle in the barn behind her, trying to calculate if she could reach it before they could reach her. "What can I do for you gentlemen?" "Gentlemen," the bearded man laughed, and his companions joined in. "Hear that, boys? She called us gentlemen. I like that. I am Jack Reeves, and these are my associates. We are looking for work, heard you might be hiring." "I am not hiring at present," Victoria said firmly. "I am sorry you rode out here for nothing, but I cannot help you." "Now that is a shame," Reeves said, dismounting. His men followed suit, and Victoria's heart began to pound. "See, we heard you were out here all alone, a pretty young thing with no man to protect her. Seems dangerous if you ask me." "All sorts of bad things could happen to a woman alone." "I am not alone," Victoria lied. "My ranch hand will be back any minute." "That would be Lucas Calloway, right?" "Yeah, we heard about him too. Also heard he is off on a cattle drive, will not be back for days yet." Reeves took a step closer and Victoria took a step back. "So you are alone, just like I said. Now me and my boys, we could provide protection. For a small fee, of course." Victoria understood then. These were not men looking for work. They were thugs looking to extort money from a vulnerable woman. Anger flooded through her, hot and bright, burning away the fear. "Get off my property, now, or what?" Reeves laughed. "You will make us." "I do not think so, sweetheart." "Now, about that fee," she said, "get off her property." The voice came from behind the barn, and Victoria's heart soared. Lucas emerged on foot, his horse presumably tied out of sight, and the expression on his face was harder than Victoria had ever seen it. He moved to stand beside her, and though he wore no gun that Victoria could see, there was something in his stance that made the 3 men tense. "Well now, if it is not the ranch hand," Reeves said, but his voice had lost some of its cocky edge. "I thought you were supposed to be on a drive." "Got back early. Good thing too, seems like I showed up just in time." Lucas's voice was calm but carried an edge like a blade. "I will ask you once politely. Leave this property and do not come back." "And if we do not?" one of the other men asked, his hand drifting toward the gun at his hip. "Then I will have to insist. And trust me, friend, you do not want that." Lucas had not moved, had not raised his voice, but something in his eyes made even Reeves take a step back. "I am giving you the chance to ride away with your dignity intact. I suggest you take it." For a long moment, the outcome hung in the balance. Then Reeves spat in the dust and turned back to his horse. "This is not over. That bank is going to foreclose on this place sooner or later, and when it does, we will be there to pick up the pieces." They mounted and rode off, casting dark looks over their shoulders. Victoria watched until they were out of sight, then her knees buckled. Lucas caught her, holding her steady while she shook with reaction. "I was so frightened," she gasped out. "They were going to hurt me, I could see it in their eyes." "I know. I am sorry I was not here sooner." Lucas held her close, and Victoria could feel his heart pounding as hard as her own. "The drive ended early. Patterson paid us off last night, and I rode through the night to get back. When I crested the ridge and saw those men in your yard, I have never been so terrified in my life." "How did you make them leave? You do not even have a gun." Lucas gave a wry smile. "I know how to fight, learned young because I had to. And I am good at making people believe I am more dangerous than I actually am. But Victoria, those men are going to be a problem. Reeves is known in these parts, runs a gang that preys on small ranchers. They wait until the bank forecloses, then swoop in and buy the property for pennies. Sometimes they even help the foreclosure along by sabotaging the ranch." Victoria pulled back to look at him, horror dawning. "You think they might try to hurt the animals or damage the property? I think we need to be careful. I think you should not be here alone anymore, not even for a day." Lucas cupped her face in his hands, his eyes intense. "Victoria, I am going to say something, and I want you to really hear me. I love you. I know it has only been a few weeks, but I love you, and I cannot stand the thought of something happening to you. Marry me. Let me stay here permanently, not as a hired hand but as your husband. Let me protect you and this ranch and build that future we talked about." Victoria's breath caught. Marriage. It was too soon, too fast, too everything. Except it did not feel that way. It felt right, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. "Lucas, we have not even properly courted. People will say, I do not care what people say. Do you love me, Victoria? Answer me that, and nothing else matters." Did she love him? Victoria looked into his face. This man who had bought her mother's jewelry and given it back, who had worked himself to exhaustion helping her save her ranch, who had ridden through the night because he missed her and wanted to be home, who had stood between her and danger without hesitation, who looked at her like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I love you. Then marry me. We will go to town tomorrow, find the preacher, and make it official." I know it is fast, but Victoria, when something is right, you know it. And this is right. You and me, we are right. Victoria thought about the dreams they had shared on the porch, about the way Lucas made her laugh and made her feel safe and made her believe in a future that included happiness. She thought about her parents, how they had loved each other with a fierce devotion that had lasted until death separated them. She thought about how short life was, how precious, and how foolish it would be to waste a moment of it. "Yes," she said again, stronger this time. "Yes, I will marry you, Lucas Calloway." The kiss he gave her was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Victoria melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt, anchoring herself to this moment and this man. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and smiling, the sun was setting in a blaze of orange and gold, painting the desert in colors that looked like hope. They rode into Panamint the next morning, side by side, and went straight to the church. Reverend Thomas was surprised but willing to perform the ceremony, and Mrs. Henderson and her husband served as witnesses, both of them beaming with approval. Victoria wore her mother's silver hairpin in her hair and the turquoise pendant at her throat, and Lucas produced a simple gold band he said he had bought in Independence, hoping for this very moment. The ceremony was brief, but heartfelt. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them man and wife, Lucas kissed Victoria with such tender joy that she felt it down to her toes. They signed the register, made it official in the eyes of the law and God, and walked out of the church as Mr. and Mrs. Calloway. The news spread through Panamint like wildfire, of course. By the time they left the general store after purchasing a few supplies, half the town knew. Sarah Mitchell looked scandalized, but others offered genuine congratulations. Mr. Patterson, the rancher who had hired Lucas for the cattle drive, shook Lucas's hand and told him he was a lucky man. Mrs. Henderson cried happy tears and pressed a jar of her famous preserves into Victoria's hands as a wedding gift. They rode home as the sun climbed high, and everything looked different to Victoria now. The same desert, the same mountains, the same dusty trail, but transformed by the knowledge that she was no longer alone. That she had a partner, a husband, someone who had chosen to stand beside her for the rest of their lives. That night, in the house where Victoria had been born, they became husband and wife in truth as well as name. Lucas was gentle and patient, and Victoria learned that love could be expressed in whispers and touches as much as words. They fell asleep tangled together in her parents' old bed, and Victoria slept without nightmares for the first time since her mother had died. The next few months were a blur of hard work and quiet happiness. Lucas proved to be everything Victoria could have hoped for in a partner. He worked tirelessly, fixing up the ranch, building a new chicken coop, repairing the roof, breaking horses to sell. Victoria managed the household and the garden, and together they began to turn a profit, small at first but growing. They made their payments to the bank on time, and if Mr. Whitmore was disappointed to see them succeed, he hid it well. Reeves and his men appeared once more, saw Lucas working in the yard, and kept riding. Apparently word had spread that the Ann Ranch, now the Calloway Ranch, was no longer an easy target. Winter came to the Panamint Valley, cold desert nights and occasional snow dusting the mountains. Victoria and Lucas spent their evenings by the fire, planning for spring. They would buy more cattle, Lucas said, maybe even invest in those quarter horses Victoria had dreamed about. They would hire help if the ranch continued to prosper, maybe build a bigger barn. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility. On Christmas Eve, Victoria gave Lucas a gift she had been working on in secret, a quilt she had sewn from scraps of her father's old shirts and her mother's dresses, each piece carrying a memory. Lucas traced the patterns with gentle fingers, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "This is the most beautiful thing anyone has ever given me," he said softly. "Thank you, Victoria." "It is our family," Victoria said, "the one I came from and the one we are building together. I wanted you to be part of it all." Lucas's gift to her was a delicately carved wooden box, and when Victoria opened it, she found her mother's jewelry nestled inside, each piece resting in a fitted compartment. But there was something new as well, a silver bracelet engraved with intertwined roses and their wedding date. "So you have something that is just yours," Lucas explained. "Not a memory of the past, but a promise for the future." Victoria kissed him, tasting salt from the tears running down both their faces, and thought that this was what happiness felt like. Not the absence of sorrow, but the presence of love strong enough to carry you through it. Spring brought new life to the ranch. The mare Lucas had been training gave birth to a strong colt, and Victoria's garden flourished. They bought 6 heifers from a rancher selling off his stock and made plans to build up a proper herd. Money was still tight, but they were making progress, and more importantly, they were making it together. In early April, Victoria realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week, not wanting to say anything until she was sure. But as the signs became unmistakable, she could not keep the secret any longer. She told Lucas one evening after dinner, watching his face carefully for his reaction. For a moment he just stared at her, and then he let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to town. He picked Victoria up and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time, and when he finally set her down, his hands went immediately to her still flat stomach. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Victoria asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy? Victoria, I am beyond happy. I do not even have words. This is everything I have ever wanted. A home, a wife I love, and now a child. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Victoria said, covering his hands with hers. "The day you walked into Mrs. Henderson's store and bought that jewelry, that is when everything changed. That is when my life started again." Lucas pulled her close, holding her with such tender care that Victoria felt fresh tears spring to her eyes. "I am going to take care of you," he promised. "Both of you. I am going to be the best father, the best husband. I swear it." And he was. Throughout Victoria's pregnancy, Lucas was attentive and gentle, taking on more of the heavy work and insisting she rest when she would have pushed herself too hard. He talked to her belly at night, telling their child stories about his adventures on the trail and making Victoria laugh with his elaborate tales. He built a cradle from smooth pine, sanding it until there was not a single rough edge that might scratch delicate skin. The baby came in early December, a long, difficult labor that terrified Lucas but that Victoria endured with gritted teeth and fierce determination. When their son finally arrived, squalling and red-faced and perfect, Lucas wept openly, holding the tiny bundle with such awe that the midwife smiled. "What should we name him?" Lucas asked, his voice rough with emotion. Victoria looked at her son, at the thick, dark hair and the tiny fists waving in the air, and thought about all they had survived to get to this moment. "James," she said. "After my father, James Calloway." "James," Lucas repeated, testing the name. "It is perfect. He is perfect. You are perfect. God, Victoria, I love you so much." They stayed like that for a long time, the three of them together in the room where Victoria had been born, where her parents had loved and lived and died. The circle of life continuing, the past and future bound together by love and hope, and the determination to build something that would last. The years that followed were not always easy, but they were good. The ranch continued to grow, slowly but steadily. They hired a young man named Tom to help with the work, a quiet kid who reminded Victoria a little of Lucas when he first arrived, looking for a place to belong. Tom proved himself hardworking and loyal and became part of their extended family. James grew into a sturdy, happy child with his father's eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. When he was 2, Victoria gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, after Lucas's mother. And 3 years after that, another son they called Daniel, because Victoria said it meant God is my judge, and after everything they had been through, that felt right. The house echoed with laughter and the sound of running feet. The ranch prospered, their herd growing until they were one of the more successful operations in the valley. They bought the property next door when the owner decided to move back east, expanding their land until the Calloway Ranch was known throughout the region for the quality of their horses and cattle. Victoria wore her mother's jewelry on special occasions, each piece a link to the past and a reminder of how far she had come. But her most treasured possession was the silver bracelet Lucas had given her that first Christmas, worn smooth now from years of wear, the engraving still visible if you looked close. On their 10th anniversary, Lucas surprised her with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with Tom and his new wife and spent a week exploring the city, marveling at the buildings and the crowds and the ocean stretching to the horizon. It was wonderful and exciting, but Victoria found herself eager to return home, to the ranch and the desert and the life they had built together. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Lucas one night as they walked along the beach, the Pacific rolling in under a full moon. "Giving up drifting, settling down with me. Do you ever wonder what else might have been out there?" Lucas stopped and turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Not for a single moment," he said firmly. "Victoria, meeting you was the best thing that ever happened to me. You gave me everything I ever wanted, everything I did not even know I needed. A home, a family, a purpose. I would not trade our life for anything in the world. Even though it has been hard sometimes, even with the droughts and the debts and the long hours." "Especially because of those things," Lucas said. "The hard times make the good times sweeter. And Victoria, every moment with you has been good. Even when we were struggling, even when we did not know if we would make it, I never doubted that I was exactly where I was supposed to be." Victoria leaned into him, resting her head on his chest and listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong. "I love you, Lucas Calloway. I am so glad you bought that jewelry." Lucas laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Best money I ever spent. Though technically I gave it all back, so I suppose it was an investment in our future." "The best investment," Victoria agreed. They returned to the ranch to find everything running smoothly and their children ecstatic to see them. James, now 10, had helped Tom fix the fence in the north pasture. Grace, at 8, had weeded the entire garden and baked a cake to welcome them home. And Daniel, just 5, had drawn a picture of the whole family that now hung on the wall of the kitchen. Victoria looked around at her home, at the life she and Lucas had built, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was what her parents had wanted for her, what they had worked so hard to give her. This land, this legacy, this love. More years passed, bringing change and growth. James grew into a fine young man, as comfortable on a horse as his father, with a good head for business that served the ranch well. Grace inherited her mother's determination and her father's gentle heart, and spent her free time rescuing injured animals and nursing them back to health. Daniel was the dreamer of the family, always sketching the desert landscape or writing stories about cowboys and adventures. When James was 18, he fell in love with the daughter of a neighboring rancher, a smart girl named Elizabeth who was not afraid of hard work. Lucas and Victoria hosted the wedding on the ranch, a beautiful celebration that brought together people from all over the valley. Watching her son exchange vows, Victoria found herself thinking about her own wedding, how fast and simple it had been, and smiled. Every love story was different, but they all started with the same leap of faith. Grace announced she wanted to become a veterinarian, one of the first women in California to pursue such a profession. It would require her to move to Sacramento for schooling, and Victoria's heart broke a little at the thought of her daughter so far away. But she and Lucas supported her dream, proud of her ambition and courage. Daniel surprised everyone by showing real talent as an artist. A gallery owner visiting from San Francisco saw his sketches and offered to represent him. And suddenly, their youngest son was selling paintings of the desert to wealthy patrons in the city. He still lived on the ranch, unwilling to leave the landscape that inspired him, but he traveled frequently for shows and exhibitions. Victoria and Lucas grew older together, their hair turning gray, their hands growing stiff with the work of a lifetime. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it deepened, maturing like fine wine, becoming something rich and complex and utterly essential. On their 30th anniversary, their children threw them a party. The ranch was full of people, friends and neighbors and ranch hands past and present. Tom, now the foreman with grown children of his own, gave a toast about how Lucas and Victoria had given him a chance when no one else would, how they had shown him what real family looked like. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Victoria and Lucas stood together on the porch they had rebuilt twice now, hands clasped, watching their grandchildren chase fireflies in the yard. "You remember the first time we stood here together?" Victoria asked softly, "When you told me about your dreams." "I remember everything about that night," Lucas said. "I was terrified you would send me away. I had only just met you, but somehow I already knew you were going to change my life." "We changed each other's lives," Victoria corrected. "I was drowning when you arrived, Lucas, drowning in grief and fear and debt. You saved me." "No," Lucas said firmly. "You saved yourself. I just gave you back what was already yours. The jewelry, the hope, the future. It was always yours, Victoria. I was just lucky enough that you let me be part of it." Victoria turned to face him, this man who had given her everything by asking for nothing. His face was weathered now, lined by sun and age and laughter, but to her he was as handsome as the day he rode into Panamint. "Do you know what the best part is?" she asked. "What?" "We still have so much more time. We are not done yet, Lucas. There are more memories to make, more grandchildren to meet, more sunsets to watch together. Our story is not over." Lucas smiled, that same brilliant smile that had captured her heart 30 years ago. "No, it is not. We have decades left if I have my way. I plan to love you for at least another 50 years, Mrs. Calloway." "Then you better take good care of yourself," Victoria teased. "I am going to hold you to that." They kissed, soft and sweet, while around them their family laughed and celebrated. The ranch that Victoria had nearly lost, that Lucas had helped her save, thrived under their care. The jewelry that had brought them together stayed in its carved box, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. And when they were very old, so old that their great-grandchildren played in the yard where their grandchildren once ran, Victoria and Lucas would sit on that same porch and hold hands and remember. Remember the day a cowboy bought a woman's most precious possessions and gave them back. Remember the moment they decided to take a chance on love. Remember every sunrise and sunset, every triumph and trial, every moment of the beautiful life they had built together. Because in the end, that was what mattered. Not the money or the land or the success, but the love. The steady, unwavering, faithful love that had sustained them through everything. That love was their true legacy, passed down to their children and their children's children, a gift more valuable than any jewelry, any ranch, any treasure the world could offer. And on quiet nights, when the desert wind whispered through the valley, and the stars blazed overhead like diamonds scattered on velvet, you could still feel it, that love, soaked into the very soil of the Calloway ranch. A testament to two people who found each other when they needed each other most, and who chose each other every single day for the rest of their lives. Years continued to pass in the gentle rhythm of life well lived. Victoria and Lucas celebrated their 40th anniversary surrounded by 3 generations of family. And by their 50th, they were considered the patriarch and matriarch not just of their family but of the entire Panamint Valley community. The ranch they had fought so hard to save had become an institution, a place of stability and prosperity in a region that had seen its share of booms and busts. James and Elizabeth had given them 4 grandchildren, all of whom showed the same work ethic and integrity their grandparents embodied. Grace, true to her dreams, had become a respected veterinarian and returned to the valley to open a practice. never marrying but declaring herself married to her work and utterly content. Daniel's paintings hung in galleries across California, but he still lived in a small house on the ranch property, claiming he could never create anywhere else because this land was in his blood. The turn of the century brought changes to the valley. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, though Lucas stubbornly insisted horses were more reliable. Electricity came to Panamint, and Victoria marveled at the electric lights after a lifetime of kerosene lamps. The world was transforming, moving faster than either of them had imagined when they were young, but the ranch remained a constant, a touchstone of values that did not change with the times. Victoria's health began to fail when she was in her mid-70s. Nothing dramatic, just the slow wearing down of a body that had worked hard for decades. Her hands, once so strong and capable, grew twisted with arthritis. Her eyesight dimmed, making the needlework she loved difficult. But her mind remained sharp, and her love for Lucas never wavered. Lucas, in turn, became even more devoted if that were possible. He helped her from bed each morning, patient and gentle. He read to her when her eyes grew too tired. He held her hand during the bad days when pain made her short-tempered, never taking offense, always understanding. Their children watched this tenderness and understood that this was what real love looked like, not the passionate fire of youth, but the steady, unquenchable flame of a lifetime together. On a warm spring evening, when Victoria was 78 and Lucas 81, they sat together on the porch as they had done thousands of times before. The sun was setting in a spectacular display of color, and the air smelled of the desert flowers that bloomed after the winter rains. "Lucas," Victoria said softly, her voice hoarse with age, "I need to tell you something. You can tell me anything, love, you know that." "I am tired," she admitted. "So very tired, and I am not afraid anymore. If it is my time soon, I want you to know that I have been happy. So incredibly, wonderfully happy. You gave me a beautiful life, Lucas Calloway." Lucas's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back and squeezed her hand. "You gave me life, Victoria. Before you, I was just drifting, existing but not really living. You taught me what it meant to have a home, to have purpose, to have love. Everything good in my life came from you." "Not everything," Victoria said with a smile. "You brought plenty of your own goodness, but Lucas, promise me something, anything. When I am gone, do not stop living. Keep working the ranch. Keep watching these sunsets. Keep being the wonderful man I fell in love with. And tell our story to the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. Tell them about the jewelry and how you gave it back. Tell them that love is worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth everything. Promise me." "I promise," Lucas said, his voice breaking. "But Victoria, you are not going anywhere. We still have time." "A little time," Victoria agreed. "But however much or little, I want to spend every moment of it with you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, each holding the other's hand, bound together by over 50 years of shared life, shared love, shared everything. The house behind them was full of family preparing dinner, voices and laughter drifting through the open windows. The land around them was peaceful, the ranch prospering under James's management now, though Lucas still consulted on major decisions. Victoria did live for another 3 years, defying the doctors who had predicted she would not see another winter. She was there when Daniel married in a surprise ceremony, having finally found a woman who could love both him and his art. She was there when Grace delivered her first foal from the ranch's new breeding program, a beautiful filly that promised to be the foundation of a championship line. She was there for Christmas mornings and summer picnics and ordinary Tuesdays that were extraordinary simply because they were shared with people she loved. But eventually, peacefully, on a morning when the desert was blooming with wildflowers and the sky was impossibly blue. Victoria Ann Calloway passed away in her sleep with Lucas holding her hand. She was 81 years old, and she died in the house where she had been born, in the bed she had shared with her husband for over 5 decades, surrounded by evidence of a life fully and joyfully lived. The funeral was the largest Panamint had ever seen. People came from 3 counties away, former ranch hands and business associates, friends and neighbors and people whose lives Victoria and Lucas had touched over the years. They buried her in the small cemetery on the hill overlooking the ranch, with a simple stone that read, Victoria Ann Calloway, beloved wife, mother, grandmother. She loved well. Lucas aged rapidly after Victoria's death, as sometimes happens with people who have been married for so long that they are more one entity than 2 separate people. But he kept his promise. He continued working the ranch as much as his body would allow, continued watching the sunsets from their porch, continued telling their story to anyone who would listen. He was especially fond of telling it to the youngest great-grandchildren, who would climb into his lap and beg for the story of how Grandma Victoria and Grandpa Lucas fell in love. He would pull out the carved wooden box, now a family treasure, and show them each piece of jewelry while explaining its history and significance. Your great-great-grandmother wore this turquoise pendant, he would say, his voice soft with memory. And when your great-grandmother needed to sell it to save our home, I bought it back for her because some things are too precious to lose. But the jewelry was not the precious thing, not really. It was what the jewelry represented, love and family and connection to the past. That is what I was really giving back to her, and she gave me something in return, something infinitely more valuable. She gave me belonging. She gave me purpose. She gave me love. The children did not always understand everything he was saying, but they sensed the importance of it, the weight of the story. They understood that their great-grandfather and great-grandmother had loved each other in a way that was special, that their love had built the foundation of the family and the ranch and everything they knew. Lucas lived to be 87 years old, remarkably healthy right up until the end. He died on a summer evening, sitting on the porch with James beside him, watching the sun set over the land he had worked for nearly 60 years. His last words were, "Tell your mother I am coming home," and then he closed his eyes and was gone, a soft smile on his weathered face. They buried him beside Victoria on the hill, and at the funeral, Daniel read a poem he had written about his parents' love. Grace spoke about how they had taught her that strength came in many forms, and kindness was not weakness but the highest courage. James, his voice rough with tears, told the story one more time about the cowboy who bought the jewelry and gave it back, and how that single act of generosity had rippled out to affect hundreds of lives. The ranch continued under James's ownership, thriving for another generation before being passed down to his eldest son. The jewelry stayed in the family, carefully preserved and brought out for weddings and special occasions, each piece carrying the story of Lucas and Victoria's love. Daniel's paintings of the ranch became famous, and one of them hung in the California state capitol, a testament to the beauty of the desert and the people who carved out lives there against all odds. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the air was still and the stars blazed overhead, people swore they could see 2 figures sitting on the porch of the old ranch house, holding hands and watching the sunset together. Just a trick of the light, the practical folks said. But the romantics knew better. They knew that some loves are too strong to be contained by death, that some bonds transcend the physical world and become something eternal. The story of Victoria Ann and Lucas Calloway became a legend in the Panamint Valley, told and retold through generations. It was the story of a woman who faced impossible odds with courage and determination. It was the story of a man who saw someone in need and helped without expecting anything in return. It was the story of two lonely people who found each other at exactly the right moment and built something beautiful together. But more than that, it was the story of what love really means. Not just the passionate romance of the early days, though they had that too, but the daily choice to stand beside someone through triumph and tragedy, through easy times and hard times, through youth and age and everything in between. It was the story of partnership and respect and unwavering commitment. It was the story of a cowboy who bought jewelry and gave it back, and in doing so, gave a desperate woman her future. And it was the story of a woman who accepted that gift with grace and gave the cowboy something equally precious in return: a home and a family and a love that lasted until death and beyond. Their great-great-grandchildren, living in a world Victoria and Lucas could never have imagined, with computers and cell phones and airplanes that crossed continents in hours, still treasured the story, still brought out the jewelry on special occasions, and told their children about the turquoise pendant and the silver hairpin and the gold locket. Still visited the ranch, now a working museum that educated people about life in the Old West, and stood on that famous porch and imagined the two figures who had sat there for so many years. And in a world that often felt cynical and cold, where true love stories seemed like fairy tales, the story of Victoria and Lucas offered hope. It reminded people that kindness still mattered, that generosity could change lives, that taking chances on love was always worth the risk. It reminded them that the best things in life could not be bought or sold. They could only be given freely from one heart to another. The carved wooden box that had held Victoria's jewelry, worn smooth by generations of hands opening and closing it, remained a centerpiece of family gatherings. Inside, along with the jewelry, were other treasures now. The handkerchief embroidered with Lucas's initials that had belonged to his mother, a pressed flower from Victoria's wedding bouquet, a photograph of the two of them on their 50th anniversary, weathered and fragile but carefully preserved. Love letters Lucas had written to Victoria during the few times they had been separated, his words awkward but heartfelt. And there was a letter Victoria had written before she died, addressed to all her descendants, present and future. It was read aloud at every major family gathering, a tradition that had continued for over a century. "My dearest ones," the letter began in Victoria's careful handwriting. "If you are reading this, then I have passed on to whatever comes next, and you are part of the family that Lucas and I built together. I want you to know how much you are loved, how every one of you was hoped for and dreamed of even before you were born. The jewelry you will find in this box represents my past, the family I came from and the struggles I endured. But Lucas, your grandfather or great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather, depending on when you are reading this, he represents my future, the life I chose and the love I found. Together we built something that I hope will last for generations. I want you to remember that this ranch, this family, it all started with an act of kindness. A stranger saw someone in need and helped without expecting anything in return. That is how I want you to live your lives, with generosity and compassion and open hearts. The world can be hard, I know that as well as anyone, but it can also be beautiful, and it is up to us to add to that beauty rather than diminish it. Love each other. Forgive each other. Stand by each other through the hard times, because the hard times are what make the good times meaningful. And never, never take for granted the people who matter to you. Tell them you love them, show them through your actions, make sure they know how much they mean to you. Lucas and I had over 50 years together, and it was not nearly enough. I would have taken 50 more if God had granted them. But I am grateful for every moment we had, every sunrise we watched together, every meal we shared, every word we spoke. That is what life is, a collection of moments, and it is up to you to make those moments count. Be brave, be kind, be true to yourselves and the values that matter. Work hard, but do not forget to rest. Build things that will last longer than you will. And most importantly, love deeply and completely without holding back, because love is the only thing we get to take with us when we go. I leave you my blessing and my hopes for your happiness. I leave you the story of how a cowboy bought jewelry and gave it back, and how that act of kindness changed everything. I leave you the legacy of a life well lived and a love that never died. Remember us with joy, not sadness. And know that wherever you are, whatever you are doing, we are proud of you. All my love, always and forever, Victoria and Calloway. The letter never failed to move the family members who heard it, connecting them across the years to a woman most of them had never met, but who had shaped their lives nonetheless. It reminded them where they came from and what values they were meant to uphold. It gave them strength in difficult times and joy in good times. And so the story lived on, passed down through the generations, adapted and retold, but always carrying the same essential truth at its core. A woman in desperate circumstances. A stranger who helped without asking for anything in return. And the love that bloomed between them, transforming both their lives and creating a legacy that would last long after they were gone. In the end, it was a simple story, really. But the best stories usually are. They speak to something fundamental in the human heart, something that recognizes truth when it hears it. And the truth is that kindness matters, that love is worth fighting for, and that sometimes the most important moments in our lives are the ones where we choose to help someone else, to open our hearts, to take a chance on something beautiful and uncertain and real. Lucas Calloway bought jewelry and gave it back, and in doing so, he found everything he had been searching for. Victoria Ann accepted that gift with grace and courage, and together they built a life that proved love is not just about the grand gestures, but about showing up every day, doing the work, making the choice to stay and fight and believe in each other. Their story became part of the landscape of the Panamint Valley, as permanent as the mountains, and as enduring as the desert itself. And as long as there were people who believed in love, who valued kindness, who understood that the best things in life are not bought but earned through courage and compassion and commitment, the story would continue to be told, a beacon of hope in a world that desperately needed reminding that true love still existed, that fairy tales could come true, and that sometimes, if you were very lucky, a stranger could ride into your life and change everything forever.